I've been playing the YouTube game for a long time now, and I'm still learning. There's so much to learn about this damn social media stuff. But I just want to say that I am first and foremost an educator, and second, somebody that's trying to build a YouTube channel for any other reason than just educating my clients and friends and those of you out there that want to learn about trees. So some of my videos are actually pretty exciting. Some of the removals, when we did a couple weeks ago about the big redwood removal, if you didn't see that one, that was pretty good. You ought to go check it out. But today's video is going to be a little more sedate. The trees that we did this last week, some of them are pretty big, but I try to find topics that I think would be unique and interesting for a broad scope of people. So hopefully you'll enjoy this one. It's going to be sort of a collective of the things that we went through this last week. So hope you enjoy this, and please give me a like and a comment if you can, and if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. I know that's the routine everybody does on YouTube, but I guess that's how you have to play the game. All right, let's jump right into this. This is what's known as an espalier. This is an apple tree, and I've actually trimmed this tree 3 times over the years. And I did a transition. This only took me about 10 minutes, but I do this every year, and it puts on about 3 to 4 feet of new growth. There it is, before and after. This is kind of interesting. This is a fence that I saw made out of the whips from some kind of a fruit tree. I'm not sure what it was. This is a hatchet that I rehandled and restored for a friend of mine. It was rusty. It's an old roofer's hatchet, but apparently it's got some sentimental value. So I sharpened it up. Probably ought to dull it down because it's a little bit dangerous now. And if you watched the last video, you saw the shake sail was cutting, and the ones on the right, I'm getting better and better, and I'm restacking them in order. This is also from a past video. I showed a giant oak tree downtown Boulder Creek over by the hardware store, and it was a beautiful old tree, and I went by to get something in the hardware store, and lo and behold, the tree fell over. So I don't know exactly when this happened, but the roots are almost non-existent. This is I turned the audio off on this one because my wife was playing the music in the background, and YouTube will shut me down if I've got any copyright music in the background. I've got a serious gopher problem in my yard, and these are some big bad boys. They're like little prairie dogs, and they're everywhere. So we wanted to plant some gladiolas, and I did it last year, and every single one of them got chewed up by the damn gophers. So I came up with an idea. I actually made this last year and didn't get around to digging a hole big enough to bury it, but this is made out of stainless steel mesh. I put a little wooden frame around the top of it, something to staple it into, put a little groove in there, and stomped it down, put it in the hole. I dug the ditch about, I'd say 16, maybe 18 inches deep. And then what I didn't show is that I backfilled it with about 3 or 4 inches of wood chips and organic matter. That's a technique known as hugelkultur, where you get wood or organic matter down below the planting area, and it becomes a moisture sink. So the water that goes down gets saturated in this sponge of organic matter, and it keeps the roots moist longer, and it's been proven to be a pretty good planting trick. So I filled it up with all the topsoil, all the good stuff that I pulled out of it, and I haven't put the gladiola bulbs in there yet. But the next step, I got to protect it from the cats. This is just another part of my garden. I've got a lot of beautiful granite rocks in my garden. And off to work. So this was part of the job that we did last week. We had to prune a number of the oak trees on this creekside property, and this one giant oak really has these clients nervous. It's a big live oak, Quercus agrifolia, coast live oak, And it's a giant tree, and it's kind of leaning towards the house, and a lot of the foliage is going over the house. And of course the question is my tree safe? And unless you can find evidence to the contrary, you can't jump to a conclusion just because the tree is leaning. So I wanted to show you, I looked all the way around the base of the tree. I didn't do a root crown excavation or even clean it up at the root yet, but so far I'm not finding any evidence of fungus or insects of any nature. But I like to read the bark. This is kind of cool. I can see that a long time ago some kid had an axe in his hands or a hatchet. That's my guess anyway. You look at marks in the bark, and it oftentimes tells a story. The story isn't always, confirmed. Here's where a large limb was removed a long, long time ago, and the bark has grown up and around it, and it's surrounded the wound. A lot of people say my tree is healed, but trees don't heal. What they do is they will grow around the wound and encapsulate the wound, and the wound is always there. Sometimes it'll shut it down to a point where the decay slows way, way, way down, but it's never a given that is an end all to the problem. So a lot of times I'll cut open these old wounds to see what it looks like underneath, and sure enough, well, this was cool. I was driving down the street and I saw all of these crows. And in Sunnyvale, crows are becoming a huge problem. They're trying to figure out all sorts of ways of getting rid of the crows because they're congregating in trees in urban areas, and especially downtown, and they're making a horrible, horrible mess. Well, I was watching this, and over on that right-hand tree, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a lead crow. He was much, much larger than all the other crows, and he landed in that tree. And about that time, then I started the camera up, and the crows just kept coming and coming, and it was like he kept cawing out and calling his mob. I guess they call this a murder of crows. It's not a pack of crows, they call it a murder of crows. I don't know why, but it's something that's always captured my attention. But I watched these crows for about 15 minutes or so. I only got about a minute of video here, but at one point it was really amazing how many crows there were in the sky. And then when that lead crow finally left, every one of them followed him. Well, this is a typical small job that we do. We do a lot of yard maintenance jobs, and one of the reasons we have to do these is because people often plant too many of the wrong types of trees. This is a carob tree here, and it gets much, much larger than this. This is actually a 3-trunk tree, and she wanted it for shade, but now it's become a problem tree. She's got to keep it contained, as is this southern magnolia. This is still a very, very young tree. I mean, the trunk isn't even 12 inches in diameter, and it's if it stopped growing, it would be perfect. But we've taken out magnolia trees with trunks over 4 feet in diameter, and the root system from these magnolias is just horrific. They tear up the whole yard. She does have a few trees that are more appropriate. She has a number of crepe myrtles, and I like to talk about the right way and the wrong way to trim crepe myrtles, but I kind of get slapped on the hand when I say don't cut them back hard, because they do flower more if you cut them back hard, but that's not the best way to treat the tree. This is a purple leaf flowering plum, and in a little bit I'll show you a wound that we had to make on the tree and why. Well, this is an interesting tree. I want you to take a good close look at it and try and guess. This is a very unique bark. I can look at this, just the bark, and tell you exactly what kind of tree it is. You've got time. Go ahead and guess. It's dormant right now. It's a persimmon tree. And a couple years ago, it broke a branch, and somebody put looks like a piece of clothesline up there to support that one outside limb. These are flowering crab apples. She wanted some color in the yard, and unfortunately when gardeners plant trees, they almost always leave the nursery stake. I even see landscapers do this, which is absolutely wrong. When you plant a tree, take off that nursery stake. It's really hard on the plant, and it shows the evidence of the impact from all these green ties on the bark. And if you look down on there, you'll see where the bark is showing some problems. This is another one that had a branch that should have been pruned off when it was planted, and I recognize it as a long-term problem. You can see where it's rubbing, and over time that rubbing would have caused an abraded area on both branches. So here I went ahead and took it off. The way it was growing was more like a sucker, so I couldn't really get a nice clean cut on it. And note that there was a little bit of bark left on there. If you go at it with a vengeance when you prune these things off and cut too far, you can cause more harm than good by cutting into the part that you're trying to protect. There's some of those marks left by the tape from that nursery stake. I've seen trees completely girdled by those pieces of green tape. This is that purple leaf plum. You can see I had to be very, very careful. I slowed way, way down with the chainsaw and just kind of very, very slightly touched it and left a little tiny bit of bark there and then broke it off. All too often I see people cut these off and they go at it with a vengeance and cut into the part they're trying to protect. So I got up and I was trimming some of the crepe myrtles, and I like to leave them as natural as possible. I take out all the dead wood and all the broken branches, and in this case there was an area of the tree that had a whole bunch of broken branches, and nobody could tell me why. It almost looked like something crashed into this tree and broke them. It was just on one side. So I suppose it could have been a wind anomaly, but I would have thought that it would have shown itself in all the trees or in different parts of this tree, but it was just one part of the front of the tree that got crunched. Now I like to use soft-soled boots when I climb thin bark trees. People that wear Vibrams or really hard-soled boots actually dig into the bark, and they cause more damage to the tree just by getting up there. But I can work in these little soft, thin bark trees very, very safely without damaging the tree. And this is what it looks like when I'm done. Notice that I did not reduce it. It produces more flowers if you reduce them, but it makes for a better, more attractive, long-lived tree if you leave them natural. Here's a neighbor's tree. Somebody got in there and talked them into reducing them, or maybe the client said, my trees are too big, and the tree company just didn't care. That's a live oak in the backyard. Here's some crepe myrtles that I've been working on for over 30 years. I drove over there and I drove by them. I often drive by them. And you can see they've never been reduced. All I ever do is take out the crossovers and any little bits of inside deadwood. And you can see they can become really beautiful, low maintenance, inexpensive trees to maintain. And here's an example of what happens when somebody tops a tree. Quite often woodpeckers move in and everything else.